In the previous lecture, we already created this custom text renderer on iOS that allows us to set some value directly from SAML and use it here to do something specific. Now, doing this on Android is going to be the exact same thing, and like I said, you can do this with pretty much any element that you want and just evaluate a certain value and do whatever you want with that element. At such degree that we could go to Android and do almost a copy-paste of the code. But of course in here we will have to make some changes. So first of all, of course, this is going to be using the same text renderer, or this is the same name, but this is coming from platform.android. Also in Android we're not going to be using a getCell. In here we have to override a getCellCore, which is going to do something very similar to what we just did on iOS. However, on Android we don't have an accessory. And of course, there is no such thing as a UI table view cell accessory. Now, here on Android, I'm not really going to be adding anything like what we just did on iOS. But just for the sake of showing you how you can actually use the same style ID that we set on SAML in the previous lecture, I will just go ahead and customize this cell. Now, the only way in which I'm going to demonstrate this is by just changing the background color. So I can just set or call the set background color method and set it to some color. This time I'm going to be using Android graphics and color to do that. And in fact, color is already listing, because this is a struct, is already listing a few options that we have. Let's just go ahead and select some values for each and every one of these options. Now, the idea here is, maybe this is not something that you may include in your application. The idea here is just to demonstrate how, by setting some value through SAML, we can actually easily customize what we're going to be doing with that value through a custom renderer. So simply here, I'm just going to change the background color by evaluating the style ID a little bit. With this evaluation, if I remember correctly, in the expense page, I still have the style ID set to checkmark. So my renderer in this case would use aqua as the color. So let's go ahead and test this out on our Android simulator. And again, this is going to be the renderer only for the text cell. So these will only be applied to the text cells that we have, not the view cells that there are here in the categories. So we'll have to navigate over to expenses to see that color being applied. And if we were to change that to, let's say, for example, this detail disclosure button in the style ID, we would get that specific color in this case. So once the app launches, we will see that change immediately. So there you have it, a small and quick example of how in Android you can also use some property, evaluate whatever you're setting to it directly from SAML to change how the cell is going to look. Just remember that in the case of Android, unlike iOS, there is no getCell method that you have to override. At least in the case of cells, you would have to use the getCellCore method. From there, everything else is really just the same to the example that we saw in the previous lecture. Setting some value through SAML and evaluating, in this case in a switch case block of code, and then just changing what the value is going to be in that scenario. Hopefully now the use of custom renderers is very clear to you. As you can see, it's quite easy really to do it. All you have to do is inherit from some specific class, override some methods here and there, make sure that you export the renderer to a specific type, and Xamarin Forms is going to take care of the rest. It's already going to take a look at all of those exports and use them accordingly. Now in the next section, what we're going to do is work with a little bit more of native functionality, because there are some scenarios in which you absolutely need some native functionality in your Xamarin Forms project. Now that is going to be done in the case of the next section with the help of dependency services, which is a very interesting topic And you can do some very interesting things with the information that you have inside of our application. So in the next lecture, we're going to talk about what dependency services are as a quick introduction before digging deeply into the creation and the usage of dependency services.